Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. I've got my friend Valinda Rowe on today, and I've wanted to do this for a long time because one of the biggest questions that I get from people across the country is how can we actually do anything or change anything in relationship to laws? So, and that being said, there is no better person that I know from a individual standpoint that can speak on that than this lady right here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mickey.
Well, I know, like, of course, there's like organizations that do things, and you're part of organizations, but as a single entity, you're kind of a earth mover down there in our capital of Springfield.
I try to keep things stirred up. I do.
Uh-huh. We met like 5, 6, 7 years ago. So just to give people an idea about yourself, you run an organization called IllinoisCarry, which you started years ago because our state was one of the last states to not have any provisions for the citizens to obtain concealed carry. Tell us about that, how that started.
Well, I didn't actually start IllinoisCarry. Another gentleman had done that. It was back in 2004.
Okay.
And Missouri had just passed their concealed carry law over the objections of St. Louis, the city of St. Louis. And my husband and I were very interested in what could we do to see that happen in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And started searching online, and I found a group of folks at IllinoisCarry.com who were interested in the same thing. It was just a small group. I think it was less than 50 of us, maybe. But a core group got together, the founder of IllinoisCarry and some other members. We talked online for quite a bit. And then finally, a gentleman, Old Coach, was his nickname, Gene Martin, who really was a coach, said one evening during one of our discussions, are we just going to keep sitting on the bench talking about this, or are we going to get on the floor and make something happen?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yes. So we got together for a face-to-face meeting and determined that we needed to go talk to the folks in Missouri, see how those groups got concealed carry passed in their state, and could they offer us any direction or any advice. And that's what we did. There were about 3 or 4 of us that went and met with the Missouri group, and they told us 3 things. The first thing they told us is that this has to be a grassroots movement. It has to be from inside your state. Groups coming in from the outside will not have any sway or very little sway with legislators.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be from the voters, grassroots level. That was number 1. Number 2, they said we needed to get women involved because they saw very little progress in their attempts until the women started going to their legislators in support of the right to be able to defend themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot harder for the legislators to look women in the eye and say, you don't really need to protect yourself with a firearm. It was a lot easier to say that to a man. And this is kind of related, but that's just the way it was. And then the third thing they said was every state that has passed a concealed carry law, it has taken about 10 years to get it done, to change the mindset of the people at the grassroots level. So you might as well.
That was pretty darn accurate, wasn't it?
Yeah, you might as well get started now. And we actually saw the law passed in 9 years, but it was actually 10 years before any concealed carry licenses were issued. And we didn't get it done legislatively from the pure legislative standpoint. We had to go to court and sue the state for violating our rights to be able to carry a firearm outside the home. And there was Moore versus Madigan and Shepard versus Madigan that were joined together. And the Illinois 7th Circuit ruled, I guess it was the U.S. 7th Circuit, ruled that the complete ban on carrying outside your home was unconstitutional and gave the General Assembly so many days to change the law to make a provision for carrying outside the home.
That sure caused some upheaval, I remember.
Yes, it did. Yes,
Those
it
were
did.
fun times.
Yes, and that was in 2013
Yeah.
when that.
So what's interesting to me is a couple things about that. So a group of people actually took action on an idea, and that I think is the biggest challenge. We've got friends in California, New Jersey, New York, those states that are way worse off than we are as far as firearm related laws. And like California, for example, there is more than enough people there that shoot guns and possess firearms and believe in the Constitution and Second Amendment to do something, but they just don't. I try to help them get petitions. And as you're saying, an outsider, and it's with our decent sized social media reach, we're telling people, hey, go to this place on this day. There's somebody going to be there to collect petitions. And this is boring stuff, but somebody else will do it. Somebody else will do it.
Well, either somebody else will do it, or what can one person do? What can one person do? And I think in the beginning, I kind of felt that way. What can I as one person do? Well, I can get in touch with my legislator. I can go to all their meetings. I can call them on the phone. I can send them emails, Facebook messages, social media, and just make sure they know me by face, by name. And if they answer the phone, they know me by voice.
Yeah.
I think that's imperative that every individual do that with their state representative and their state senator, so that those representatives know that their actions and their votes are being watched, but also that you have to represent you and your constitutional rights. And one person here, another person next door, another person down the street, and before you know it, you've got a dozen people calling your legislator when these bills, these anti-Second Amendment bills hit the floor. You've got a dozen people calling. You've got 24 people calling. You've got, and it doubles, 48, and it just goes on from there. But it can start with one person in a legislative district to get that network going.
When you and I first met in person, it was during an event put on by Illinois State Rifle Association, IGOLD. You know what it is, but to the people listening or viewing, it stands for Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day, which to the best of my knowledge is by far, or at least has been, the largest gathering of its kind where citizens are lobbying a state government. Yeah, when that first started, it was just a handful of people in the cafeteria at the Capitol, correct?
Right. It started off as the Illinois State Rifle Association Lobby Day, and several of us at IllinoisCarry went to Lobby Day in, I believe it was 2006. 2 years into this effort, and realizing that we needed to spread our grassroots movement, join with others. And so we went to Lobby Day, and there, like you say, there was a handful of people that met in the cafeteria, and then we went to lobby our legislators. And then after that day, we got together and decided that that needed to be more emphasized to gun owners throughout the entire state, and not just one organization's lobby day. And so we approached the ISRA for the next year. 2007 was the first IGOLD, and we said, we're willing to help organize this event. We're willing to help get buses all state to come in and join this effort. Would you be willing and interested in opening up your lobby day to all gun owners and not just ISRA members? And they said, you betcha. And so a team began with IllinoisCarry and the ISRA, and we provided the information and did the footwork for chartering the buses and finding sponsors, finding locations to be pickup points for the buses, and showed up, beforehand to help with the setup and the tear down. So we were hands and feet, and the ISRA graciously helped fund those charter buses that needed extra funding. And the very first IGO 2007, went from being a handful of people in the Capitol cafeteria to about 1,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
The second IGOLD then word spread, it turned out we couldn't use the first venue anymore. We outgrew it in the first joint effort. And so then the next year we met at a different location and expanded to about 2,300, outgrew that location. And then from there on for 11 years now, 10, 11 years now, the Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day is held at the huge convention center. That's changed names a couple of times, but it's the huge convention center downtown in Springfield.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a place that you would see a concert or a basketball game or something of that nature.
Yeah, it holds 7,000 to 8,000 people or more. And the difficulty we're seeing now is that at one time we had 8, 9, 10,000 people coming on Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day and marching to the state capitol. And that was what the whole event was about. We'd meet for a rally and information at the convention center and then march down Capitol Avenue. I mean, it was quite a sight. And I'm sure you've got photographs and video of this huge sea of gold colored T-shirts, headed toward the Capitol. And, but once Conceal Carry was passed, this is also something that Missouri warned us about. Once you see your law passed, you're going to see people get complacent. And they're going to think, well, we've accomplished our big goal, and now we can get on with our lives. And they tend to drop out, drop back. They're not as involved. They're not paying attention to what's going on in the state legislature. And that's kind of where we're at now, where we need people to get re-engaged, re-involved on an individual basis with the legislature, because we've got tough road ahead of us.
The interesting thing is, and I think what I'm about to say is indicative of any social or legal discussion one could have. It's a people problem. And talk about taxes or schools or policing or anything, pick the topic. And it's always comes down to a very few number of Americans actually do the lawmaking, do the voting, and are involved in the planning and execution of how our republic works. People just, they kind of parse that out of life, yet they want to enjoy all of the freedoms that we are guaranteed, but don't understand that that guarantee comes at a price, which is actually doing civic duty to protect, proliferate, promote said laws or lack of laws, because that's one of the problems we have is too many laws, right?
Oh, yes. Well, and we go back to the power of one, thinking, well, what can I do? I'm just one voter. I'm just one, what are my phone calls are going to do or whatever. It can do a lot. One person can do a lot. We have over 2.5, I believe right now, 2.5 million FOID card holders, firearm owner ID cards, which means they either own firearms or make use of firearms or want to or plan to. And, we don't agree with having to have a FOID card here in Illinois, but right now that's our reality, and we're kind of stuck with it for right now.
For you non-Illinois people, Illinois is one of only a handful of states. You got to have an identification card through our state police to purchase, possess, or transfer firearms.
Or ammunition.
Ammunition as well, yep.
Yes. But we've got like 2.5 million of those FOID card holders. If they were all engaged in standing up for our rights, protecting our rights, advancing our rights, we would be unstoppable.
Let's just say 20,000 of them were engaged, Yeah. 10%.
Right. So we know these people are here in Illinois. What does it take to get them engaged? Do they understand the threat that we are facing with the new governor that we have coming in and the supermajorities in both the House and the Senate here in this state? And both leaders in the House and Senate not friendly to gun rights or gun owners at all.
Yeah, that beyond friendly or beyond not friendly. A couple of these people are some of the worst in the
hostile to the idea and to the right.
The interesting thing to me is how much, and I've watched it play out in various political campaigns, which this is nothing more than a political campaign in my mind. You sway the vote, and then the vote pushes legislators to enact law, but it's not the exact same, but very similar process to get people involved. And having watched that play out so many times, I, like you, when I first got involved in various areas of politics, I thought, well, what am I going to do? And so you get on the phone and you're personally a little sheepish, like, sir or ma'am, I'm so-and-so, here's what I'd like to talk to you about. And in my mind, I'm thinking, they hear this stuff all day. So to them, it's just, they're just going to placate me because they have to be nice to me because I'm a constituent. And am I really actually doing anything? And I'm sure you get enough of those phone calls and you get scared about a group of people pushing you out of office, which I think that's like, just for the listeners, I'm not educating you, but for the listeners, that's like one side of the equation, physical. So you've got like NRA is a perfect example of using the leverage of masses to, I'm going to use the word scare, to scare a legislator into voting a certain way. If we don't do it, these people are going to run somebody against us. They're going to push us out. I don't feel that's wrong at all because it's the will of the people. If enough people get involved, and conversely, if that group of people, be it NRA or the firemen's union or whoever it is, if they elect somebody, we're going to elect Valinda because she believes how we believe and she's going to vote on our behalf. And that, I think, is the part people, I hear from so many folks, well, even if I vote, it doesn't matter. It's all rigged. No, it's not. It's actually not. Like, if it appears that way because there's only 50 people, like, at the core of most campaigns, 20, 30, 50 people, and doing anything. That's really the issue.
And in this last election, there were elections that were decided by one vote.
Yeah.
There were some decided by 50 votes. There were some that were decided just by 100 votes. We do have power at the ballot box if we just use it.
I was looking at some of the campaigns across the whole country, and I forgot there was one in Florida I was looking at. It was a statewide election, but it came down to like a couple hundred votes across the whole state. That's nauseating. That guy's going to think about that the rest of his life. If I had worked like 2 more weekends out of the year, maybe I'd have got it done.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing, and you understand this, so we don't like FOID cards. We don't like that we have to have limits on the expression of these rights. So folks just want to like abolish them. Well, it doesn't work that way. You kind of have to. It took years for all of these things to get built up into a big monument of oppression, really. So you got to kind of chip away at it. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, at IllinoisCarry, we tell our members that we fight this battle on 3 levels. We fight it legislatively by monitoring what the legislature is doing. Whenever they're in session, we have people monitoring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The bills they're introducing, the things they're saying on the floor, going to committee hearings, putting out alerts when we need witness slips signed. For those
What's a witness slip for those that don't know?
For those that don't know, whenever a bill is heard in committee, the public can weigh in whether they support or oppose a particular bill. And so they can go to the Illinois General Assembly webpage to that particular bill before it's heard in committee, and they can submit witness slips saying, I oppose this bill or I support this bill. And they're either a proponent or an opponent. And on IllinoisCarry, we list those bills and the links to the witness slips. We make it as easy as possible for people to have their voice heard that way. And we also send out email alerts for people that want to subscribe to our email alerts. We send those out when action like that is needed. So on a legislative level, we fight this battle. Then we fight it on the judicial level with lawsuits. When they do get bills passed that violate our constitutional rights or bills that are already in laws that are already in existence, then we have to go after them in the court system, which is how we achieved concealed carry in the state of Illinois. There was a complete ban, and there were plaintiffs that were willing to take on the state and challenge them, and that they are heroes in my book. And so we fight that on the judicial front. And then we fight it on what we've kind of already talked about, and that is the electoral front, with who we vote for, trying to vote in candidates who support the Second Amendment and support our rights. These three prongs, these three fronts that we fight on are essential to this battle, especially here in Illinois in such an unfriendly environment.
Do you suppose most other states have a system of witness slips online like Illinois?
I don't know if they have witness slips, but I know that in every state, bills have to be posted online before they're heard. It's just the openness of government that this information, even on a federal level, bills are posted online, and you see what's been filed. And there are search engines that you can set up. There's different participating things in each different state where they can go in and be notified or go in and see what bills have been filed, who sponsored them, what legislator is responsible for them, and can contact your legislator ahead of time. If they're not the sponsor, contact them ahead of time and say, hey, I see this bill has been filed. I hope if it comes to the floor, I hope you will vote against this. Please, represent gun owners in a fair and constitutional way and help defeat this piece of legislation.
What would you?
Some system that voters can find out what is going on.
Talking about the judicial side of things, right now there's a big pushback. It's interesting. You look at, you and I both remember like the assault weapons ban of the 90s, and there's a lot of young people, as there's this new explosion of gun rights across the country and concealed carry and people training, and it's kind of an interesting thing on the whole planet how much this has taken root here in the U.S., this preparedness movement, if you will. And a lot of young guys, I say guys because I don't really ever have this conversation with women, but there's a lot of young people, I'd say 35 and younger, that don't remember that 15, 20, 30 years ago, there was almost no states with concealed carry. And now there's a big pushback because of things like NRA maybe folding on something like a bump stock. And I try to have conversations with these people. I say, look, I don't care about bump stocks. I understand your point about the bump stock, but what they don't grasp is that an organization like NRA, and I don't want to make this about NRA, but the point is this, that these fights have been happening for so long, and sometimes you have to give a little and take a little and give a little and take a little, and it's a strategic game rather than it's chess versus checkers, I guess. What would you say to that?
Okay, especially like the bump stock ban. They're politically, when these things are introduced, the way it works is and this is IllinoisCarry struggles with this many, many times, especially this last legislative session, that if a bill is introduced and it comes to the floor with a super majority, which means if it's vetoed, the veto can be overridden. That means it's guaranteed to pass if a governor or a president signs it. Okay. If it has a super majority, and we had this with a couple of bills this last session here in Illinois, that both sides of the aisle came to us and said, we're going to pass this bill. So you can either stay completely opposed and it's going to pass right over you, right over your objections. There's, it is guaranteed that it's going to pass. They have a supermajority. So you have an option there to try to get as many protections in that bill as you possibly can, so that when it does pass, hopefully constitutional rights are protected.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it does pass, you can also challenge it in court to bail on organizations who see the need to fight in that manner is not helpful to any of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not always going to agree 100% with every gun rights organization. They've all, got good points, but we're not going to agree 100% on every action that they did take or didn't take.
Go back a couple of sentences. I lost you. Your internet got laggy. The last thing I heard was there are organizations that do business like that, and we're not always going to agree on how we do.
Right. We're not always going to agree with all of the Second Amendment organizations 100%. But that doesn't mean we should pull back from them or not join forces with them. We need to stay united. There are national organizations that over the decades I've been disappointed with at one time or another because of different issues, but that doesn't mean I don't want them in the fight with me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I'm going to withdraw my support and walk away from them. I need as many teams fighting with me as I can possibly get. So I think it's the question being, you said, like the bump stock, possibly that they caved on a bump stock ban or something. IllinoisCarry's always been opposed to the bump stock ban. The reason we're opposed to it is because of the slippery slope of making it a federal offense to be in possession of a piece of plastic. But there's a lot of reasons to be opposed to, but it's a slippery slope. If they can ban that accessory, what other accessories will they go after next? And guaranteed they will go after another one. They won't be satisfied. They never stop. The anti-gunners never stop. But I would not walk away from an organization because they didn't fight as hard against it as we do.
Sure. And I agree with you. I agree with you on your assessment of that. The point I wanted to make sure people understood is that there are reasons that concessions are sometimes made.
Yes, there are. We got a lot of flack at IllinoisCarry because of Illinois' firearm restraining order bill this last year. Mm-hmm. In other states, they call it a red flag law. Mm-hmm. But here in Illinois, that is not the same law that was passed. And legislators from both sides of the aisle came to us and said, we're passing this. And we've got the supermajority to override the governor's veto. This is going to become law. You can sit back and refuse to talk to us about this bill, or you can fight to try to get as many protections in there as you possibly can. But it's becoming law, it's a reality, and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Right. So, and that I want to come back to that. That's the point, exactly right there. So I see these young guys and they're like, screw this organization or that organization. They suck. They're not constitutionalists in any way, shape, or form. They just bend and break. They don't get how government basic civics works. They've got the ability to pass the bill. We have the ability, in this situation, to at least have some discussion to make it better or less bad, I guess is a better way to look at it. So what do? Do you say, oh, I'm gonna stand my ground and go home and pout about it, and then have no ability, and I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the listeners more, or do you make that concession? It's a tough one. It's like a submerged vehicle. You can only save so many people. Who you picking? And it's one of those crummy decisions sometimes has to be made.
And we're fighters. We've always been fighters. And so we get in there and we scrabble and we fight to try to get all the protections we can. When this particular bill was first introduced, anybody in your neighbor could just, have a petition issued to have your firearms a firearm restraining order against you.
Mm-hmm.
And we got in there and we fought against that. We fought against several other aspects of the bill. Was a preponderance of the evidence, which is a low level of evidence, and got it changed to it must be clear and convincing evidence. It's a higher bar, a much higher bar. They wanted to this ban, this firearm restraining order, if this petition was issued against someone, that they could not have firearms for life. And we got in there and fought. And if someone is deemed a danger to themselves or others, and there's clear and convincing evidence of this, then this firearm restraining order can be issued, but only for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
At that 6 months, it must be reviewed and either rescinded, expires, or renewed. And the individual has the right to go in and appeal this before a judge. And again, it goes back to clear and convincing evidence. Indiana had these protections for about 15 years or so, and that's who we were looking at to see what kind of protections they had. And were able to institute all of these protections into this bill. When it was all said and done, and they wanted the firearms destroyed, confiscated and destroyed. And we fought and were able to get the ban on ownership removed. It does not terminate your ownership of the firearms. You can transfer them to someone that you trust or an FFL to secure them and maintain them for you until this firearm restraining order is lifted. So you're not losing your property, which is in other states, they just confiscate your property. You never get it back.
I talked to a guy that happened to in New York.
Right. And you don't have to petition to get your firearms back. Whenever this is dismissed or expires, you get your firearms back without having to petition the court to get them. And again, it was a hard fight, and we got a lot of criticism for it. But we felt it was necessary to try to get these protections in there. And when the final language was done, we ran it by some of the best constitutional attorneys in the nation, and that we know, and said, could you take a look at this? Is due process protected here? Are our rights protected here? And they took a look at it and said, in the balancing interest, when someone has a mental health issue and they are a danger to themselves or the public, and balancing that out, they do get their day in court. They must have a hearing in court within 14 days of this firearm restraining order. And they said that, yes, they thought it would pass constitutional muster. And then we never supported the bill, but we did at one point, after we were guaranteed, that we could get all the protections in there. We were basically neutral then on the bill.
Interesting point about this discussion. This is the same position that basically our state was in. Hey guys, this is happening. So let's get on the same page. Not the same mode of how it happened, because this was through court proceeding rather than a supermajority. But that I think is what you're describing here is something I think too many folks don't understand, especially when you look at a state like California or Jersey or New York or Illinois. And the sad thing is we had good numbers for a couple years here, but we couldn't get anything done.
Well, and what we've got looking forward is with a change in our governor. We've got a new governor coming in, J.B. Pritzker, who stated, during the campaign that if he was elected governor, the NRA, gun owners, there would be no safe space for us in the state of Illinois. What does that tell you? And then in the House, they have an even bigger majority than they had before. A super majority is basically what they have. They've got a super majority big enough now that they could do constitutional amendments, I believe. And then a supermajority in the Senate. So Our fear now is that everything that we've been fighting off for the last 2 decades is going to be on the table, and they're coming after all of those things that they have not been able to get passed in previous General Assemblies.
So being in this kind of a situation, like some people are in very anti-gun states, what is a citizen to do?
Well, there's those three fronts. They've got to be active on the legislative front, the electoral front, and the judicial front. And right now, our hopes are pretty much directed toward, here in Illinois, directed toward the judicial front. A court challenge on any bill passed, any law that goes into effect that, infringes on our Second Amendment right.
Who pays for that, Valinda? So people listen to this, and this is one reason I defend NRA, because they've invested so much of their members' money in lawsuits over the years. But who pays for that normally?
Well, here in Illinois, our court cases have been funded by the National Rifle Association, the NRA, have provided attorneys and paid, picked up the fees to fight some of our court battles. And also a big player in this arena is the Second Amendment Foundation, which has funded a lot of our lawsuits and court challenges. Back for the Conceal Carry, the NRA funded the case Mary Shepard versus Madigan, and the Second Amendment Foundation funded Moore versus Madigan, and then those two were heard together in court. So standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting these battles out. There are individuals who go to court and pay their own legal fees, but there are very few that can afford to do something that is possibly going to go all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court. Very expensive. We have some attorneys, I think, that have done some pro bono work at the lower level, but I don't know about the higher levels if they still do that.
Okay. Some people may remember, they should remember, if you care about this stuff, McDonald versus Chicago, right? That was an Illinois case that went all the way to the federal Supreme Court. And I ask this because I want people to understand it's not like it's got to be an individual just going and dumping his 401k into lawyer fees. There are, and that is why these organizations are so important, the collective knowledge, the collective workload getting spread out, and then the legal backgrounds. These cases are being fought across the country. Although they go on both sides, like you said, there are lawyers for Anytown USA and all these other organizations that are doing the exact same thing.
Moms demanding attention, as I've heard them called.
Oh yeah.
They all have legal recourse, in the courts. So we're very fortunate to have Alan Gottlieb with the Second Amendment Foundation and the NRA with their legal team. So they're essential to this. I hope people around the country will support both of them. Sure.
So when you or if you hear people saying to heck with this organization or that, what you stated is, hey guys, you got to get on the same page. It's not all about.
We can't afford to do that. We need every dog in the fight. We need every soldier on the field. We need every player on the team. Each different group has their own strengths that we need to play to, and we need to support them all. Let's go with a sports theme. Let's go with a basketball team. You have different players on the floor because of their different skills. Sure. But you need them all to make the team. And that's the way it is in this fight.
Sure. Yeah, we watched that play out in Illinois with some of the different groups. You and I have had discussions about watching different squabbles take place. And again, all of these things are all people issues. Back to your discussion on the red flag laws, it comes down to people passing the law. It comes down to hopefully there's good people implementing the law, the judge, the state's attorney, the prosecutor that hears the case. These organizations, are these people in your group, my group, NRA, are the folks that are involved in our region, are they able to communicate, or are they a bunch of immature babies that just want their face in the newspaper? And there's so much, like, from one extreme to the other. So Like if you go look where change happens, you don't have a lot of that squabbling. You have people that want to work and get stuff done and make it happen.
Well, and you've made an important point here in going to the local level. Who do we have implementing these laws? Now, this is something unique, I think, about Illinois right now. In this last year, we have had, I think it's nearing 60 or over 60 counties that have passed countywide resolutions declaring themselves to be a sanctuary county, where, or at least, if not using the word sanctuary, they have stated that they will not enforce, their state's attorney and their sheriffs will not enforce any egregious law passed that's going to strip us of our constitutional rights. Mm-hmm. Some of those even put it on a ballot initiative, and it passed overwhelmingly during this last election on every single ballot that it was on. That there are citizens who have expressed to their local sheriffs and their local state's attorney, who are elected officials, that we are counting on you to protect our rights if the state legislature runs haywire and runs over us. And there are 60 of them so far that have said we agree.
The interesting thing about that, and most people may not understand this, is those resolutions are not technically lawful, right? Like the state police can still come into their county, and yeah, it doesn't supersede the state law, but it tells you something. Most, like our state, you know, this is extremely rural. I always tell people, like, my backyard, I can see to Iowa. I literally can't. It's 100 something miles, but we're 60 miles from downtown. So we're like the farthest Collar County from the lakefront in Chicago, and I'm like as far west as you can go in this county. So, and I drive all over the state. If I leave and come down to visit you guys, it's farmland and as far as the eye can see. The entire, what's that?
Rolling hills and cornfields.
Yeah, that's our whole state. But we've got this sickness. I purposely said it like that, in this little section of Chicago. And it's like the same thing happens in New York. I visited New York a couple years ago with my kids, and we went to the Adirondacks, and we went and saw a bunch of Revolutionary War sites through the mountains. And that whole state is gorgeous dairy farms and rolling hills and mountains. And then you get to the ocean, and it's like that group of people run and dictate what all of those folks out in the country should and can do with their lives. And it's sad, but that's what's happening. And so,
well, and that leads me to what I feel is one of the bright spots in this fight. And it's a tiny spot. It's not a glaring bright spot. It's just a tiny little gleam of light.
Way to take the hope away.
A gleam of hope. And that is where these anti-Second Amendment bills come from. We're talking about the northeast quadrant of the state, Chicago, Cook County. And for decades in Chicago, it was illegal to even own a handgun in your home. Mm-hmm. And then with Mr. Otis McDonald,
God rest his soul.
Chicago, yes, God rest his beautiful soul. He put up that, he was the named plaintiff in that case, along with Colleen and David Lawson, good friends of ours, and Adam Orloff, which, again, we had to go to court to sue for the right to own a handgun in your home in Chicago. And they won. That ban was unconstitutional. But you've got two or more than 2 decades of people in Chicago, living in Chicago, with that being against the law, and only bad people had handguns. You know, that is a lot of to overcome. That's a stigma for handgun ownership. But that was passed. That case was won in 2010, after Heller was won in 2008. In 2013. We won the case for carrying that handgun not just in our home, but outside our home. And this is my gleam of hope. getting past that stigma of those decades of not having a handgun in Chicago and restrictions in Cook County as well. Now, those people, law-abiding souls in Chicago and Cook County, can take the training, get a concealed carry license, and those numbers are growing.
Yeah.
As those numbers grow, I believe the support to protect that right is going to get stronger and stronger, and they will have more of a voice against these legislators who are wanting to strip them of their rights.
I would agree with everything you just said.
Yes.
It's one of those societal things, that the ebb and flow where once upon a time every woman wore a skirt below her knees and every man wore a tie. And now those things change, and it's in Illinois, definitely, it was, I think this countrywide, it's become, there's many discussions on this. Like some guys call it like the sissification of America. I don't know if I want to go that far into it, but it was so normal for so long that weapons, and that's what they are, is weapons, were removed from the average person, that it became bad, like you said. So I'm going to add to that. We've now got this huge influx of veterans that have fought a war for almost 2 decades now, that are becoming, I've got friends that are special operations vets, that are authors, that are business leaders, that are community leaders, that have run for state and federal level offices. And so, I'm not saying because they were in the military that equates to Second Amendment, but most of these guys that I know love and protect the Constitution. So you've got those people going into the school system and so on and so forth, and it will begin to permeate and seep through the fabric of our society again. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Right. And just like we saw concealed carry movement, I think it kind of started in Florida, maybe was the first state to pass a concealed carry law. I remember when we were researching for Illinois, first there were 20 states that had concealed carry, then there were 25, then there were 30. Then before you know it, there was 48, with Illinois and Wisconsin being the 2 holdouts. And then we were all alone. We were the last state to pass a carry law. Well, and now we see the same thing happening with expanding those rights. And that is my hope. I may not live to see Chicago become a pro-Second Amendment city. I may not live that long. But I know that the tide is changing in that city. There are groups now, Chicago Guns Matter. There are, with our friend Rhonda Ezell, another plaintiff who won her court case.
Lovely lady.
Ban on gun ranges inside the city. Wonderful lady. Your readers should do some research on her. She's just a fantastic lady and a fighter. So I know that the tide is slow moving, but one of these days, I believe the legislators coming out of Chicago and Cook County are going to be more concerned about protecting our rights, because they're going to lose their seat in office if they don't, because their voters are going to be putting the pressure on them to protect their rights.
As I'm sitting here thinking about the different topics that we covered, if somebody that you never met walked up and said, "Hey, I heard the podcast with Mickey. What can I do tomorrow? Where do I start? Where do I begin? I live in Connecticut. I live in Rhode Island. I live in New Jersey. I live in one of these places that I've got a big road to hoe. What do I do? Where do I go?"
Okay, the first thing you need to do is contact your state legislator. And if you are concerned about doing that by yourself, you say, "I don't know the subject well enough. I don't know if I can present my arguments well enough," then just go to your local gun range or your local gun shop, get to know people, get a couple of buddies, get their wives to join you. It's important to have the women involved. And
are the women coming so they can make sandwiches? That was a joke. That was a joke.
The guys are coming so they can make the sandwiches. But we always say when we had town hall meetings or whatever, we're sending the message out to the guys, bring your wives, bring your husbands, bring your aunts, bring your uncles, bring your cousins. Just come to hear. But anyway, if you're not comfortable doing that on your own, there are people who would feel the same way, and 5 or 6 in a group, invite your legislator to a coffee, go to meet them at their office as a group, but get involved on the local level. That is a must. And there are organizations out there, we'd be glad at IllinoisCarry to talk to anybody who's wanting to try to do this. The ISRA, Illinois State Rifle Association, has a gentleman who this is what he does. He will, if a group of people, small group or individuals, want to go talk to their legislator, but they're just not quite sure how to get that done, he'll come talk to you, or he'll set up the meeting and be there. It's a great opportunity to take advantage of, but that's what they have to do. They have to get involved on a local level.
I based on having traveled coast to coast teaching, I have found what you said exists in every state I've been in. I think I've taught in 30 states, and there's always a handful of people that are the less effective version of you, but there's somebody out there that's carrying the load for the rest of the people in their state. Do you ever get mad? Sometimes I get mad, and I don't want to like voice it. I'm not angry, but it's like, I guess it is angry. I look at all these people like here in Illinois that reap the benefits of the work of the few, and it's okay because that's how it works. But then they just complain, and it's like, man, you guys are jerks. Like, you didn't do nothing. I'm using improper grammar for an effect. You didn't do nothing, and then all you want to do is complain, yet you now have this gun on you. Yeah, which I can't carry into 21 different locations because they didn't do a good job passing the law. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Where were you when this was getting passed? Does that ever just like, I know you're always smiling and happy. Does it ever just get in your craw, dig in your between your ribs there like a big sharp nail?
Well, just like I'd say only daily.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of criticism. There's lots of people ready to criticize, and why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And I'm thinking, do you even understand the political process? Do you even understand? Go back and watch how a bill is made with, the little cartoon guy, I'm a bill,
And it can be months or years of back and forth for a bill to be crafted to the point that it becomes law.
Yes. But, it's easier for some people to criticize. And sometimes the criticizers feel like that's their role. That's how they're contributing. They feel crap.
I'm the watchdog.
Yeah. And, but, you just can't let those people hold you back with criticism. I fight strong where I can fight. If I see something that I know is not in my bag of tricks, then I'll try to find somebody who can do it. I'll find somebody that can go speak to a legislator if it's someone that I can't get into. There's just, but like you say, there's always the criticizers. There's always a small core group that does the most work. If you go to any organization, it could be PTA, it could be the local garden, group.
Political party, whatever.
Yeah, the parks groups, volunteers. There's going to be a core group that does all the work. And there are others that come and that are happy to serve and happy to help if you just give them direction. And then there'll be those that'll stand around the outside and criticize. And it's been that way, even the Revolutionary War. Of the general population, it was just a small group who actually fought and won the battle.
Yep.
And so, on my IllinoisCarry page, my motto is, it doesn't take a majority to win. It just takes a very vocal and ferocious minority to set the brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. And that's what I see I do. I feel that I am the one that tries to keep the brush fires burning and setting brush fires of freedom with every legislator, with every individual, everywhere I go.
the Revolutionary War analogy, I think, is perfect. People live in America. We wave our flag on the 4th of July, but they forget that 56 dudes, just 56 of them, signed their death warrants. Some of them lost their
life away.
Yeah, families, fortune. Some of them came out on top. Some of them didn't. Some of them died. Some of them were left destitute. Some of them's families were hung by trees. While then, and some of them said, I think it was Adam said, one day in the future, paraphrased, people will launch rockets and aerial displays on this day to commemorate what we did, and we may be long gone. They knew it, even though it was almost like a good parent, like I know it's good for you. You don't appreciate it. You'll appreciate it later.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
Like,
when I go into the Capitol, I have a ID, on a lanyard around my neck, and that lanyard, Samuel Adams' name is on that lanyard.
Oh, cool.
And so, and I believe that he was the one with the quote about setting the brush fires of freedom. And we cannot forget what our founding fathers did and what they stood for and the fight that they fought against all odds. Mm-hmm. We can do less. We can do no less. They handed us the inheritance. I get emotional.
Me too.
we have to take up the battle. Each generation has their own battles to fight. And I just try to recruit as many fighters as I can.
It's a dereliction of citizenship, in my viewpoint. It's a selfish dereliction of citizenship, because we've bred, and everybody says that the good old days were great, and I don't believe that, because black people don't get tossed to the back of buses anymore, and white people can't own them. That's a pretty great advancement. You can vote for the last 100 years as a female. That's pretty great, like that. So it's the good old days were not always that fantastic, but people scratched out their existence and were patriotic for whatever the ideals of the day were. We've now got a large section of society that feels like this institution of our republic is here for them, not that it's a reciprocal symbiotic relationship where they help protect and proliferate that republic, and the republic protects and keeps them safe, and they can raise a family and chase whatever their happiness is.
And then hopefully as they get older, they will mature and they will get wiser, and they will realize the reality mm-hmm. that there is no one out there that can take care of you. As far as your rights being protected, you have to be involved in that effort.
Amen. That, I think, is specifically if I look at the core of all of the issues talking to people, is that they don't fully grasp that concept. Nobody owes you anything. Well, no, it's my right. It's constitutionally protected. Unfortunately, that's a piece of paper, dude, written by dead people. So like you have to make that real today. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. If we all disappeared, that paper means nothing. Right?
That the people that signed that are not, they have trusted us to pick up the mantle. And was it Benjamin Franklin? A lady asked, well, what kind of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's up to us to keep these freedoms and to again, fight them on the legislative battle, fight them on the electoral front, and then fight them in the courts.
I think one thing that we didn't touch on that I know you'll wholeheartedly agree on is, and this is something that we do at CarryTrainer, I feel that the number one thing we can do is train our families, not to shoot guns, but to, my children are now, my daughter turns 18 in a few days, the youngest one, they have an appreciation for America. Not the same as you or I. I don't know if my daughter would be moved to tears quoting Adams, but maybe some because she'll appreciate it. So,
yes.
Like that instill that. Don't just take your kid to the 4th of July parade. You've got a whole 300, like even Christmas the other day. The fact that we can celebrate a religious holiday without oppression, be it with a Santa Claus or Christ, and if you want to have a black Santa, that's legal to do so. Or if you want to have, whatever your holiday is, we're allowed to do that. People need to appreciate that and instill that in their offspring, so that then back to what we were talking about, this change of the mindset, so to speak, of society.
Well, and you're right, because, when we were growing up, we had history and social studies in school where they covered all of this. And studying the Constitution amendment by amendment and, the Bill of Rights. That's not as much of an emphasis now in our schools. We had, just as an example, had a grandfather come to me with his granddaughter's study paper, study sheet for the Constitution, that they were getting ready to take the Constitution test. And the information under the Second Amendment was totally incorrect, totally. It said that the Second Amendment did not give you a right to own a handgun, that it was only relegated to military, militia, and police.
Who wrote that? That was from a state, was that our state?
It was a typed out study guide.
But I'm saying, was that in Illinois? Was it from a public school?
Well, yes, it was from a public school right here in the county where I live. So I was shocked, because I felt like my county, everybody here understands the Second Amendment and knows, about this. So being involved, this is one person being involved on a local level. My husband and I called the school principal and said, we had gotten this study sheet. We were concerned about it. And could we meet with him? And so he said, sure. We came in and we said, this is totally incorrect. We cited the court cases and the Constitution and all of that, and said, this is incorrect and this needs to be corrected. And, where did this come from? Is this from a textbook? And it came from a study guide that was published nationwide for the U.S. Constitution and state constitutions. And so from there, we had the principal.
You're just following the paper trail, seeing like, well, who wrote that?
Who wrote that? Yes. And on the school level, what we did is the principal, bless his heart, set up a meeting for us to talk to the teachers who were teaching this information and giving them the proof that this was incorrect, and citing the law cases and so forth that disproved, especially with, McDonald, with Howler and McDonald, the Supreme Court said they cannot prevent you, a law-abiding citizen, from owning a handgun in your home. And so that got corrected on the local level. But that wasn't enough. This publisher was sending this information out all over the entire country. And so I called the publisher and had to leave a message saying that this message is incorrect and I need to speak with someone. Please call me back. And 2 or 3 times I called and didn't hear anything back. So then I contacted the NRA and NRA TV and said, this is what's going on in our small community, and I'm wanting to try to find out how we get this corrected with this publisher. Would you be interested in covering this story? And they said, yes, we'd be very interested. So we set up an interview for that next week.
I remember this. This was a couple years ago. I think you had told me about this, right?
Yes. So me, just being one person, I contact the publisher again, and I have to leave a message. And I say, I've called before. I'm concerned about this issue. You are printing information that is incorrect, that is going out to our students across the country. And I am doing a media interview tomorrow with a large organization that is interested in this issue. I would like to have your input before the interview. And
that's as fair as it could be.
Yes. And within an hour, I had a return phone call.
And then what?
And then they opened up the conversation then and said, well, could you, here's my email address. Could you email us the information that is incorrect? And could you state why you think it's incorrect? And so that opened up the door for me to send the Supreme Court rulings, the dates, links to all that information. And then we did the interview with the media. And I don't know if the company received more pushback, but I was then, I think maybe a week or so later, I can't remember the exact timeline, they got back with me and said, we have reviewed your information and we find that it is correct and we will be changing our publications.
Good.
For the next school year.
Couple of points I want people to take away from that. One, which is obvious, I wonder how many other blatant misrepresentations are in these textbooks across the country. My mother talks about it constantly because she homeschooled some of us for a short while. But the more important point that I want people to take away is Valinda and Mike, your husband, spent at least 2 days at the school. I'm guessing at least 5, 6, 8, 10 hours on the phone. Plus you had to go do the research and correspond via email and such. And you didn't get paid a dime.
No, we are. IllinoisCarry is an all volunteer organization.
Right. That's what I want people to understand. You spent let's say you spent 1 day of your life combined. And I bet you it was more than that. But let's say you just spent 1 day of your life. I bet you probably spent more like a week or two all told with this one issue. Yes. Okay, we'll say it's a week or two. An average person's going to take a week vacation off of their job to do this, and I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't, but that's what's required. Nobody else did it. Nobody else said, hey, I'll call the principal and see what's up. I'll call the publisher. I'll call up NRA and get them involved. I'll do this. I'll do that. Most people just say, oh, that sucks. And then that's the end of it.
Right. And the important part here is being involved on a local level. If you've got children or grandchildren, or even if you don't, you need to be finding out what is your local school teaching our children about the Second Amendment. Ask to see their study guides. Ask to see the textbook. I
went and helped out at one of our high schools for their government day last year for a friend of ours' daughter, and I was just asking the kids questions, and I was blown away. I talked to the teacher out in the hall after the fact. I'm like, what are you actually teaching them? Like, it was like, I mean, the whole discussion of Constitution and lawmaking is not that big a topic. I mean, yeah, we're not talking about like being a lawyer, but just how a bill's made, the 3 parts of government. It's not that much stuff. And they like glossed over the important points and then like just talked about stuff that a lot of it didn't really matter. And when we got to the gun stuff, they're like, all that the high school really shared with them was the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. That was like all that they talked about, and then like went on to the next one. And they'd talk a lot about free speech because that's internet and TV and music. But the gun one, they just kind of like spit it out.
They don't want to get into that. Right?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. It's fantastic that you did that. So I hope, one of my hopes with having you on here is that people see, here's just a little lady from Southern Illinois that wants to get stuff done. Not to slight you, if you can do it, they can do it. Right. Not that you're a special person, but you're no different than Adams or Franklin, and they're no different than you. Right? Right.
Just one individual can really affect change. We've got to get past that mindset that one person one person is not effective. One person can be effective.
Yeah, we can move mountains if we put our mind to it. I love when folks say, you know what they should do? Or you know what they ought to do? Or you know what they should make? I always think, like, who's they? So if you guys are watching, that's a they right there. There's a they. There's one of the theys. And thank God for theys, because if we were all the people that just said who's the they, we would have no food to eat.
Whenever we were back in 2004 and we got into this pursuing the concealed carry, we went to our state senator at that time. And I said, what do we need to do to get concealed carry passed in the state of Illinois? And, who can we talk to? Who can get this done? And he laughed and he said, well, it's never going to happen in the state of Illinois. And
I heard that from dozens of people.
Yes. And he turned and walked away laughing. And I turned and looked at my husband and I said, I could have taken two paths. I could have said, well, that's that. There's not really anything we can do. There's not going to happen in Illinois. Or, as I told my husband, well, it looks like we're on our own. We're not going to get any help from him. So I started looking for help from other people. And so I think that's something else. When you get involved as an individual, as that one person, don't get discouraged if right away, people don't jump up and down to join you in your efforts.
Right.
Keep looking for those people that will. The naysayers, the criticizers, the people that said, oh, you'll never get that done. Now they say, wow, I never believed I'd see this day. It can be that way with a lot of other issues. I can't go to my school board and make a change. Well, yes, you can go and have your voice heard to your school board or to your school principal. And then other people could very possibly join you because they're just waiting for they're just waiting for someone to pick up the mantle, and they would be glad to support them, but they don't feel like they can do it themselves.
Right on. I appreciate the time that you put in, your husband Mike puts in, the other folks from IllinoisCarry, and the folks from ISRA and NRA. I defend all at any juncture that's required, only because I know that if it was all up to you or all up to me, we wouldn't get as much done as you stated with the collective. So
we've all got our different strengths. Yeah, we've got our weaknesses. We've all got our strengths. I like to say, in the beginning, the ISRA, they're a large statewide group, and they have. I
believe they're the largest state firearms group in the nation.
That could be. And
I believe they're also the oldest.
Mm-hmm. I believe that is true too. And they have their strengths and their weaknesses. IllinoisCarry is a smaller group, but we're fast moving. We're mobile. We can get in and set up town hall meetings in certain areas really quickly, and we get the word out. We've got our people monitoring the General Assembly, like I said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can get alerts out very quickly. We're more of a grassroots. We have some organization, but a lot of it is just grassroots efforts throughout. Somebody, who's a member just contacted us about, a town hall meeting that a legislator was going to have. Well, we send out the word and say, go meet your town legislator, your state legislator if you're in this area. Get these conversations started.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Different groups have different, aspects that are strong. We got to use them all.
One thing I'd like to add about just food for thought for people, something you and I've talked on a lot, is good old-fashioned courtesy. I don't know how many times we've met people that they're angry because of the injustices they see, so they pour that out on lawmakers or on the public, and they want to rant and rave, and there's a time for that, I suppose, but I tell people, if you go to your city hall or county office or state government or wherever you're going to go, put a nice shirt on, brush your hair, talk polite, smile, be kind, because I'm not going to listen to you. Like, I go to the DMV the other day and I'm laughing with the 3 or 4 people I had to interact with because we're having a good time. I'm at the DMV. I don't want to be there, but whatever. And I turned around and ran into my brother-in-law who just happened to be there, and he's a good guy, but he's like, what are you so happy about? I'm like, I'm not like happy to be paying the state all this money to put license plates on my car, but Al's a good guy, Ron's a good guy. It was right before Christmas. We're having fun. Well, you get a different reaction out of people, just basic communication skills, but people get so upset or are so upset that I've watched them walk down that parade route with us, and they go into the Capitol. I've had to tell people, like, hey, man, take it easy. Like, these people know you're coming, and they already, folks, I'm talking about legislatures in office, but then you get guys in there like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to change this and change that. Well, that person doesn't have to do anything that you're telling them. So nor do they probably want to listen to you once you come off like you're a right-wing gun-toting nut job.
Well, and this is just human nature. When just as an individual, anytime you run into somebody, whether it's at the store or out in the community or whatever, and they're angry and they're mad and they're coming at you and criticizing you, what's the first thing you do? Whoa, you kind of put up the walls. Legislators are human too, and that's what, if somebody's coming at them angry, like, whoa, the walls can go up. If you come up with, you don't have to be jolly and fake, but if you just come up in a semi-cordial, professional attitude.
Hi, Bob. I'd love to talk to you for a minute.
Right. I've got some serious issues I'm concerned about. Reach out, shake their hand. I have done that to legislators who are very anti-Second Amendment, but will invite me into their office because I'm not hostile. I'm wanting to discuss. I'm wanting to enlighten. I'm wanting to persuade, whatever, with a smile and a handshake, introduce myself by name, introduce my husband or whatever, shake their hand. Have you got a minute? I'd like to speak with you, or call them up. A lot of times when people call their legislators, they're not going to talk to the legislator. They're going to talk to a clerk. They're going to talk to a legislative aide. Be kind to those people. They work hard. They work long hours. They're going to be relaying your messages. You want them to relay your message. Make sure it's coherent and respectful, short, to the point. We're just going to get a lot more headway that way than, with starting in there with anger and insults and criticism.
I met that Valinda lady. Boy, was she rude. She read me the riot act, and then everybody will then the next person they talk to would say, oh, I heard about her. Steer clear.
Especially when you're talking with legislators, you want to be able to get back in there again. If you want to schedule another appointment with them, they've got to, you've got to present yourself in such a way that they're not going to feel threatened or that they're have an angry mob on their hands if they set up another appointment with you. It's kind of like when my husband and I were in the photography business back in another life, anytime we would go on location, we would present the most, as best we could, our most respectful, kindest, easy to get along with self, so that if we needed to go back to that location, we would be welcome.
Sure.
And so we have instituted that with legislators. We're to the point. We don't back down from our points, but we do it as politely and as intelligently and professionally as we can, so that when we do need to get back in, we're not going to get a legislative aide saying, I'm sorry, but the legislator is not available this week.
He's busy for the next 4 years.
Yes. Right. We want to be able to get back in there. A legislator that's anti-Second Amendment, you want them to hear what you have to say. You don't want them to close that off before you ever even get the conversation started.
Sure. And I bring this up because there's a time for a patriotic fire and brimstone kind of a speech to rouse the troops to go out and do the Lord's work. But then when it comes time to actually communicating to the people that are opponents, you got to change that up a little bit. You can't give the old, I'm lighting brush fires. Do you understand who I am? You know what I mean?
Here, buddy.
Yeah. Right. I've got a whole mob of people in the street that are going to come in here and light your whole office up.
I have a tendency to be like that. I am an intense individual. Whatever my interests are, whatever my current, battle of the day, I am intense. Sure. And early on, early on, I had a kind of a mentor that taught me about the legislative process, and we went to the Capitol, and he introduced me to some legislators. And very early on, one of the first things he said was, dial back the intensity when you first meet a legislator. You want them to get to know you and not run when they see you coming down the hallway.
It's like a pushy car salesman.
Yes. Dial back you'll get your chance, but just dial it back there a bit. And so I have to work at that sometimes because I am intense. I get enthused, I get excited, and I'm tenacious, and sometimes that wears on people. So sure. I have to be aware of that I want to be welcome in their office when I go.
Know thyself.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody's different. I just wanted to make sure folks understood. It's not, you see so much in writing, people talking, you read the NRA magazines, and it's always like fight. We got to fight. But at the end of the day, the fighting is people talking and communicating and trying to find common ground, because this is the other thing I tell folks: you have a right to own a firearm and they have a right to hate them, and that's just the way it is. And they have a right to want to eradicate the Second Amendment. That's part of their right as a citizen of our nation and as a elected official. If they want to do that, they can, right?
Yes, they can. And I'm glad you brought that up about, there are people that are just totally against guns, and you're not going to make any headway with them from an argument standpoint. Something that I encourage people to do is if this is someone that you know and you feel safe and comfortable doing it with, invite them to the range. Invite them to and say, I know all the safety procedures. This will be a safe, unthreatening opportunity for you to experience firearms at the range, so that when you are talking about your side of the argument, you will be informed and not, an uninformed person just battling against the Second Amendment is somebody that has not had the opportunity, I believe, possibly not had the opportunity to see what tools they can be and understand. They can also be very fun, the sport, the aspect of this. And so I encourage people, if you know someone, and I do know, I have someone in my family, very close in my family, who is anti-gun, terrified of guns. And I've invited her, many times, come shoot with me, come to the range with me, let me inform you, so that you are taking your argument from an informed platform.
Yeah.
And many times, if you can get someone to the range and have a good experience at the range, you can maybe not change them completely or, turn them 90 degrees or whatever, but you can persuade them that it is not the scary situation that they think it is.
Sure.
You can, again, enlighten them, inform them. And I encourage people, if you've got someone that you argue with constantly, just invite them to come go with you. See this first. Don't take somebody else's word for it. If you want to have any influence with me with your argument, come see the issue firsthand, and then we'll talk.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a almost from our side of the perspective, or our side of the coin, like, hey, I'll look at your viewpoint, but you haven't even seen mine. You're just taking the word of anti-gun.
Social media.
Yeah, social media or some of these groups. That the other interesting thing I always like to say to people having this discussion, and I found this to be true. I can't think of one instance I've not found it to be true. From Bloomberg to the Moms Demand Action, all of these people are doing something that they feel is in the best interest of their families, their communities, America as a whole. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. And it's based on the totality of their circumstances, their life experiences, the hurts or challenges they've had. Like if you ask a parent from Newtown or one of the shootings in Florida or Columbine, they're going to have a completely different experience than somebody that grew up like you or I, having fun experiences out shooting pop cans off of a fence rail, for example. So there's like those people's desires, and any law for the most part, most of them are there, seatbelt laws or drinking laws, they're all there because somebody felt that it was in the best interest of society to do it, which I think when you come at it from that perspective, it at least helps you humanize the person or people, and you can discuss it. I've got a family member that, talk about our president, for example. I couldn't even, and I wasn't even engaged in the conversation, but I heard her yelling at another family member at a party. And I'm like, are you even like sure of the things you're saying? Because I'm pretty sure you're just reading like tweets from like news, like you're not even like, nothing that you said, like he eats children. You want to vote for a man that eats children? Like, I don't think he actually eats babies, but like just the stuff was so off the wall. I have a AK-47 hanging there on the wall. I had a family member leave. This room I'm in is completely secured, like vault. But I had a nephew that told his mom one time, Uncle Mickey has an AK-47. She left, took the kids and left the family barbecue because just to be on premise with such a weapon of destruction was just absurd. And I'm like, okay, like I didn't tell her at the time, your 10-year-old shot that at a family picnic a few years ago. I didn't tell her that, but people, we need to remember that even on both sides, those people, like my family, both family members, those fears or feelings are rooted in them trying to live a long, full life, be happy, and they just have different facts and figures and experiences. Would you agree?
I do agree with that. And from my perspective, my husband grew up in a household that had firearms. And from the time he was a young boy, they would, shoot rifles and pistols. And I believe he was hunting by himself. He was like 9 years old, had his own gun, and they'd let him go out and hunt rabbits or squirrels. And I grew up very differently. I grew up in a household without any firearms, raised by my mother. She raised 3 children on her own. She was terrified of handguns, all guns, because of a situation that she had experienced earlier in life. And I grew up terrified of handguns. In fact, when I met Mike in college, I don't know if you know this, when I met Mike in college, I didn't want to be in the same room with the gun. I didn't want to touch one because I was afraid it would go off.
You did tell me that once. My wife was like that as well. And it's like, well, it's going to be either you love me or I'm down the road, because I'm not like parting ways with weapons.
There was and with us, there was a real culture clash. And my husband is a very wise man. You know my husband, Mike. He's very wise, very patient. And the first thing he did was teach me the firearm safety rules. He said, if you don't ever want to hurt yourself or somebody else accidentally with a firearm, these are the rules you have to know and abide by, and don't ever take them lightly. And that alleviated a great part of my fear.
Sure.
The second thing he did was he taught me how they worked, how they functioned mechanically. And with those 2 pieces, the firearm safety rules and how they worked, that removed the fear that I had of firearms. Now, I still have a very healthy respect for firearms when I'm handling one or I'm around somebody else that's handling one. Those firearm safety rules are front and center every time. But they became just a fun thing that we would do for entertainment, recreation, go out, like you say, shoot tin cans, shoot, targets. I found out that I kind of had a knack for it. I was pretty good target shooter, and became to really enjoy it. But then there came a time in our lives, a period of years. It wasn't just a one incident, period of years. We were targeted by a mentally ill family member. And those firearms that were recreational became essential, I felt, to my safety and the safety of my family. And fortunately, we never had to use one in a self-defense situation, but we were prepared and trained in case we needed to. And that's when my whole attitude about firearms really changed. And I went from being a timid person, kind of more or less, oh, please don't hurt me kind of person, to, with that knowledge of firearms, to being a strong person saying, don't try to hurt me because I don't want to hurt you. But if it comes between you, the bad guy, and me, I choose my family. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. And that made me a stronger person. It changed who I was. And I wanted to not just experience it for myself. I wanted to teach other women so that they could be strong and they would have that, they would be powerful in themselves. And that's,
and I want to make sure people understand, you're not saying guns made them powerful. It was their belief in their own ability to affect.
It was their knowledge, knowledge to use the tools that are available to equalize. You know, I'm a small person, you know, 5'3". I don't weigh very much. And if kind of like Mary Shepard, you know, the dear sweet lady in Shepard versus Madigan, who helped get us concealed carry through the courts.
Guys, look her up. She got her ass whooped by a dude trying to rob a church.
Yeah, it was, he was a 6'3", 200 and maybe 250 pound, 220 pound paroled felon that got into the church and was, they believe, attempting to rob the church, and beat her and another elderly lady up and left them for dead.
Yeah, beat them bad.
But a handgun, a shotgun, a rifle, whatever, can be an equalizer where a 6'3", 200 and something pound man up against a 100-pound woman, she can protect herself. So that was what encouraged me to become an instructor. And I'm a coordinator for our local gun range, for our concealed carry classes, and for our Women on Target events that we have annually. And because I think that, and we have women who come and say, I've never touched a gun before and I'm terrified. And I said, well, you know, at the end of today, you will have the knowledge that you need to handle a firearm safety. And then it will be up to your attitude and your follow through whether you become adept at it. But you will have the knowledge. And at the end of the day, when the event is over, we go back and review, and those women are different women. I
believe it. I've watched that light bulb switch in not just women, but people that had a deep-rooted fear of firearms. And it's not like you said at the onset, it's not that you no longer respect them, but all of a sudden that switch goes on, kind of like a young person driving for the first time. What do I do? And then next thing you know, you're changing the radio stations and wind's in your hair and you're enjoying the drive.
Right. When you first get into the car, you're thinking, okay, where's the seatbelt? Okay, the ignition, you know, what to adjust the mirror. You have to think all these things through. And before you know, you're getting in and your feet, you think, oh, wait, seatbelt. Oh, I already did it. It's just automatic. You become more comfortable with the function. So I think those things are important. When I have ladies who, or other students tell me, you know, I'm just terrified of guns, I'm afraid of them. And I say, well, that's a healthy fear. There's unhealthy fears and then there's healthy fears. And I feel like fear can be a God-given tool to let you know that danger is about.
It can kill you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this fear is, if you do not have the information that you need to be safe with a firearm, then you are right to be fearful, and you need to remedy that with having the right knowledge.
I think in the future we'll have to do another discussion with you, and we can talk a lot about not just women, but new shooters, people scared. I know you've got a lot of experience on that topic of getting people into the right frame of mind. We'll have to circle back and do a discussion on that. How does somebody visit your website? How do they find you? How can they donate? How can they find out more?
Okay, you can go to IllinoisCarry.com, and that takes you to our homepage, and you will see across the top up there, there is, on the page, there are links to up-to-date news and legislation and things that are going on. But at the top, there is where a donate button, and it can take you to the donate or subscribe to our email alerts. There is a word called forum that we strongly urge you to click on. That takes you to all of our discussion forums. We've got several different ones.
Those are hugely active too.
Very, very active and vast amounts of information. We have one on the licensing process, to how to get a FOID card, how to get concealed carry license. We have one on education training, a training forum where you can go and look for classes in your area that might be offered on a lot of different topics. Handguns, not just concealed carry, but handguns, rifles, shotgun, defensive training. Then we have the Illinois politics, which is, just as it says, things that are going on politically in the state of Illinois. We've got national politics, and there's some other forums there that are very informational. And if you can't find the information that you're looking for, then there is a Contact Us button, and you can contact Illinois Carry through email or private messenger and ask the questions that you need to ask.
Fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate knowing you. We've always have great discussions. Hopefully get to see you in person again, not too long. Once we get this posted up, I'll send you a link to it so that you can share it. But I appreciate your time. The world needs more Valindas.
Well, each individual at a time. Get out there and find each other.
Get out there and light a brush fire.
Yes.
The fun thing about brush fires is you still have to do something once you lit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it going.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your time. And folks, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please do. If you'd like more information on this topic, I'd actually like to delve into this one deeper and pump out some more information for you guys in whatever state you're in on how you can effectively change the laws to make them freer and more aligned with what our founders had in store when they put those documents together. This is Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. Be well, be safe, and remember that you are your own Calvary. Be well. Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.